The twisted remains of Murphy's M1 Garand catch the first pale light filtering through the olive groves north of the Volturno River, its splintered stock and bent receiver telling a story of one soldier's clumsy moment that would reshape everything about this January morning in 1945. Murphy runs his fingers along the broken metal, calculating angles and distances while his squad settles into defensive positions around the stone bridge that represents the only escape route for 3 companies of the 3rd Infantry Division, now pinned somewhere in the Italian hills beyond radio range. The bridge itself spans barely 30 yards of shallow creek water, but its ancient stone arches have become the difference between an orderly withdrawal and a massacre. Murphy's platoon drew bridge security duty when their advance stalled the previous evening. What seemed like routine work until their radio died during the river crossing and left them isolated from command. Now, as grey dawn reveals German infantry moving through the terraced hillsides in loose formations, Murphy stares at his useless weapon and feels the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like the lead blanket of winter fog rising from the creek valley. Behind him, Corporal Jenkins adjusts the bipod on their squad's only bar, his movements quick and nervous as he counts the enemy's silhouettes emerging from the tree line. 40, maybe 50 Krauts, Murphy, and that's a Panzer IV coming up behind them. The tank's angular profile moves cautiously along the narrow road, its long gun traversing slowly as the crew searches for targets among the stone parapets and defensive positions the Americans hastily scraped from the rocky soil during the night. Murphy's decision comes with the clarity that fear sometimes brings to young men far from Texas cotton fields. Pull everyone back to the bridge itself. Use the stone walls for cover, but keep fields of fire in both directions. He hefts the broken rifle, feeling how the twisted barrel throws off the weapon's balance, then sets it aside and picks up his field glasses. Without his own weapon to maintain, he becomes the squad's coordinator, moving freely between positions while his 7 men prepare to hold 30 yards of medieval stonework against a reinforced German platoon. The morning air carries the metallic clink of enemy equipment and the low rumble of the Panzer's engine as it advances toward the bridge approaches. Murphy cranks the damaged radio set, finally raising a weak signal that connects him to Lieutenant Morrison, somewhere in the hills beyond. Bridge secured, but we're about to have company. How long until the main force breaks contact? The answer crackles through static. At least 2 hours, maybe 3, before the trapped companies can organize a fighting withdrawal to their current position. Murphy looks at his broken rifle, then at the advancing Germans, then at the faces of men who joined the army to see the world and found themselves instead holding an Italian bridge at dawn with insufficient ammunition and a plan that made sense only until the enemy appeared in overwhelming numbers. The first mortar rounds bracket their position, sending chips of ancient stone flying like shrapnel, and Murphy realizes the broken Garand might become something other than a symbol of his own clumsiness, if he can make the enemy believe what his eyes tell him cannot possibly be true. "Anybody got a spare belt?" Murphy calls to Jenkins, who tosses over his pistol belt without questioning why their squad leader suddenly needs extra equipment. Murphy crawls forward to where his rifle lies among the scattered stones, working quickly to strip away the splintered wooden stock completely while German small arms fire begins probing their defensive positions. If stories like this make you imagine what you'd do under fire, tell us in the comments how you think you'd react in this situation, and stay with us for the next chapters. The deception takes shape with the desperate improvisation that keeps infantrymen alive when doctrine fails, and survival depends on making the enemy see threats that exist only in imagination. Murphy uses Jenkins' belt to lash the twisted barrel of his broken M1 to a protruding piece of bridge masonry, creating what might pass for the tube of a bazooka or anti-tank gun if observed from a distance through morning mist and the confusion of battle. The crude ruse would never fool a close inspection, But in the Italian hills of January 1945, tank commanders have learned to respect even the possibility of American anti-tank weapons. The Panzer IV stops its advance 200 yards from the bridge, its turret traversing slowly as the crew searches for the source of what they believe to be anti-tank fire. Murphy's improvised position draws the tank's main gun, each high-explosive shell sending chunks of medieval stone flying, but failing to silence what the German crew perceives as a prepared defensive position. Meanwhile, Murphy directs his squad's fire with hand signals, creating the impression of a larger defending force by having his men shoot from different positions in sequence, their muzzle flashes appearing and disappearing along the bridge's length like a company-sized defense rather than 8 riflemen with a single automatic weapon. Private Kowalski, barely 19 and still writing letters to his mother in Detroit, peers over the stone parapet at the advancing German infantry. "They're spreading out, Murphy, making it look like they think we got a whole platoon up here." His voice carries the mixture of fear and wonder that comes when ordinary soldiers realize their impossible situation might actually be working in their favor, at least temporarily. The broken rifle, propped among the stones like a scarecrow made of twisted metal, continues to draw enemy fire away from Murphy's men while buying precious minutes as the German infantry hesitates to advance across open ground toward what they perceive as a prepared anti-tank position. Murphy moves between his men, redistributing ammunition and adjusting fields of fire, his movements quick and purposeful, as he calculates how long 8 rifles and 1 bar can hold a stone bridge against a reinforced enemy platoon supported by armor. Sergeant Williams, the platoon's senior NCO, crawls up from his position near the bridge's southern approach, his face grim with the mathematics of their situation. "Murphy, I count at least 3 squads moving up through those olive groves, and more coming from the east. Radio says the main force is still pinned down, needs another 2 hours minimum." Williams has been in the army since before Pearl Harbor, long enough to recognize when tactical doctrine collides with the brutal reality of combat in the Italian campaign. Murphy adjusts his field glasses, watching German soldiers advance through the terraced hillsides with the methodical patience of veterans who have learned to respect American defensive positions. The Panzer IV resumes its advance, moving cautiously along the narrow road, its commander apparently still uncertain whether the bridge can support the tank's weight or whether concealed anti-tank weapons wait among the stone arches. The uncertainty becomes Murphy's greatest asset, more valuable than additional ammunition or reinforcements that will not arrive in time to affect the morning's outcome. The sound of small arms fire echoes from the hills behind them, where the 3rd Infantry Division's main force fights its own battle against German positions established during the night. Murphy's radio crackles with fragments of tactical communications, updates from battalion headquarters that paint a picture of American units scattered across the Italian countryside, each fighting isolated actions while trying to maintain contact with adjacent forces and coordinate a withdrawal that depends on keeping escape routes open. Murphy checks his watch, noting how time moves differently under fire, each minute stretching like an hour while tactical situations change with the suddenness of weather in the Apennine Mountains. His broken rifle, transformed from symbol of clumsiness into instrument of deception, represents the kind of battlefield innovation that separates survivors from casualties when superior enemy forces meet determined defenders who refuse to break contact according to any reasonable timeline. The German attack begins in earnest as mortar rounds walk across the bridge approaches, each explosion sending fragments of stone and steel whistling through the morning air, while Murphy's squad returns fire with disciplined bursts designed to conserve ammunition and maintain the illusion of a larger defensive force. The broken M1, still lashed to the bridge, masonry like a twisted scarecrow, continues to draw enemy attention and tank fire, while Murphy coordinates his men's response to probing attacks from multiple directions. Jenkins works his bar in short bursts, the distinctive sound of the Browning automatic rifle echoing off the stone arches as he engages German infantry advancing through the olive groves. "They're testing us, seeing how much fire we can put out," he calls to Murphy between bursts, his voice steady despite the circumstances. The corporal has developed the veteran's instinct for reading enemy intentions, recognizing the difference between reconnaissance fire and the kind of sustained assault that will overwhelm their position within minutes. Murphy moves along the bridge, checking ammunition supplies and adjusting his men's positions as German small arms fire increases in intensity. The tactical situation becomes clearer with each exchange. The enemy commander believes he faces a prepared defensive position with anti-tank capability, but grows more suspicious as American return fire fails to match the volume expected from a full platoon. The deception that saved them initially now becomes a race against time, requiring Murphy to maintain the illusion until relief arrives or the enemy realizes 8 riflemen hold a bridge that should be defended by 30. Private Rodriguez, manning a rifle position near the bridge's northern end, takes shrapnel in his shoulder when a mortar round explodes against the stone parapet. Murphy crawls to his position, helping him prop his M1 against the wall and showing him how to work the bolt action, despite his wounded arm. "Can you keep shooting?" Murphy asks, knowing the answer matters more than medical attention that cannot arrive until the bridge is secure or abandoned. "Yeah, I got it," Rodriguez responds, his voice tight with pain but determined to maintain his sector of fire. The wound bleeds steadily but remains functional, the kind of injury that separates soldiers who continue fighting from those who surrender to circumstances beyond their control. Murphy redistributes ammunition from the wounded man's cartridge belt, ensuring every defender has enough rounds to make the enemy pay for each yard of approach to the bridge. The radio crackles with updates from the main force, still engaged in their own fighting withdrawal through the Italian hills. Lieutenant Morrison's voice carries the strain of commanding scattered units under pressure. "Bridge element, we're taking fire from prepared positions. Estimate 2 hours before we can begin movement to your location. Can you hold?" The question hangs in the static-filled air like a challenge to Murphy's understanding of what 8 men can accomplish against overwhelming odds. Murphy keys the handset, his response carrying the matter-of-fact tone that conceals both fear and determination. "We'll hold." The simple words represent a promise that will require everything his squad possesses and more, testing the bonds between men who signed up to serve their country and found themselves instead defending 30 yards of Italian stonework with insufficient resources and inadequate support. Would you follow the orders exactly, or trust what your own eyes and instincts tell you in a moment like this? Comment which path you'd take and share this episode with someone who loves real human stories from history. The Panzer IV resumes its advance, moving more aggressively as its commander grows confident that American anti-tank defenses may be weaker than initially assessed. Murphy watches through his field glasses as German infantry follows the tank's advance, their movements coordinated and professional, veterans of the Italian campaign who have learned to reduce American defensive positions through methodical application of fire and movement. His broken rifle, still visible among the stones, becomes both symbol and weapon in a battle that will determine whether 3 companies of American soldiers escape encirclement or face destruction in the hills beyond the Volturno River. The moment arrives with the inevitability of dawn breaking over the Italian hills, German infantry advancing in coordinated rushes while their supporting tank moves close enough for Murphy to see the enemy commander's face through the Panzer IV's cupola. The broken M1, still lashed to the bridge masonry, has served its purpose as long as deception can substitute for firepower. But now the enemy pushes forward with the confidence of overwhelming numerical superiority against what they finally recognize as a vastly outnumbered American force. Murphy makes the decision that will define both his survival and his nightmares, leaving his position among the stone parapets and sprinting toward the southern approach where German infantry threatens to outflank his defensive line. Jenkins' bar chatters steadily from the bridge's center. The automatic weapons sustained fire, buying precious seconds while Murphy reaches the most exposed position and begins working his way forward through scattered rocks and demolished masonry toward the advancing enemy soldiers. Without his own weapon, Murphy becomes a coordinator of violence rather than its direct instrument, moving between his men's positions and calling targets while maintaining the defensive illusion that has held the German advance for nearly an hour. The broken rifle, visible among the stones behind him, continues to draw enemy tank fire that explodes harmlessly against ancient stonework, each shell wasted on a target that exists only in the German crew's tactical assessment of American defensive capabilities. The Panzer IV commander finally commits to crossing the bridge, his tank lurching forward across the narrow span while German infantry follows in its wake. Murphy realizes the deception has reached its limit, the enemy's direct assault requiring a response that exceeds what 8 riflemen can deliver through conventional defensive tactics. The broken M1 becomes a symbol of adaptation under impossible circumstances, representing the moment when survival depends not on superior equipment or overwhelming firepower, but on making crucial decisions with insufficient information and inadequate resources. Murphy's voice carries across the bridge positions, calm despite the circumstances. Fall back to secondary positions, keep the bar central, rifles covering the flanks. His men respond with the disciplined movement of soldiers who understand their leader's tactical instincts, have kept them alive longer than doctrine suggested possible. The withdrawal proceeds methodically, each rifleman covering his neighbor's movement while maintaining fields of fire that force the advancing Germans to pay for each yard of progress toward the bridge's northern terminus. The tank's main gun swivels toward Murphy's new position, its barrel tracking left as the crew searches for the anti-tank weapon they believe must exist somewhere among the American defensive positions. The psychological effect of Murphy's improvised deception continues, even as the tactical situation deteriorates, German infantry advancing more cautiously than their numerical superiority would normally justify, still uncertain whether concealed bazookas or anti-tank guns wait among the stone arches and defensive positions. Jenkins takes shrapnel in his legs when a mortar round explodes near the bar position, his automatic weapon falling silent for crucial seconds, while Murphy sprints across open ground to reach the wounded gunner. "Can you work the trigger?" Murphy asks, helping Jenkins prop the Browning against the stone wall while blood seeps through his torn trousers. The corporal nods grimly, understanding that their defensive capability depends on maintaining automatic weapons fire that suggests a larger force than 8 increasingly desperate riflemen. Murphy takes over ammunition distribution, moving between positions while enemy small arms fire increases in volume and accuracy. His broken rifle, abandoned now among the stones where it served as both decoy and symbol, represents the transformation from individual soldier to battlefield coordinator, the moment when personal weapons become less important than tactical decisions that determine whether his men live or die in the next few minutes. The German assault reaches its climax as enemy infantry reaches the bridge approaches, their advance supported by tank fire that systematically destroys American defensive positions. Murphy realizes the position cannot hold much longer, but radio communications indicate the main force still requires time to organize their fighting withdrawal from positions in the hills beyond effective supporting range. The secret that will never appear in after-action reports reveals itself in the space between Murphy's decision to hold and his understanding that holding means accepting what no 19-year-old should contemplate. The broken M1 lies abandoned among the stones, its twisted metal catching morning light, while Murphy positions himself at the bridge's most exposed point. Not because tactical doctrine demands it, but because retreat now means watching his men die one by one as German infantry overwhelms their positions. What the citation will describe as exemplary leadership under fire feels from the inside like controlled terror, each decision balanced against the knowledge that 8 men cannot indefinitely hold 30 yards of stonework against a reinforced enemy platoon supported by armor. Murphy's hands shake as he redistributes ammunition from fallen and wounded soldiers, his voice steady despite the circumstances as he calls adjustments to his squad's defensive fire, while calculating how many minutes remain before their position becomes untenable. Jenkins works his bar despite shrapnel wounds in both legs. The automatic weapons sustained fire, creating the illusion of defensive strength that has kept the German advance cautious rather than overwhelming. "Murphy, we're down to maybe 20 rounds per rifle," he calls between bursts, his voice carrying the matter-of-fact tone soldiers use when discussing their own probable death. The mathematics of small arms combat in January 1945 allows no optimistic interpretations. Insufficient ammunition facing superior numbers equals casualties or capture within minutes rather than hours. The German tank commander finally recognizes the American defensive position for what it actually represents. His Panzer IV advancing across the bridge with renewed confidence while supporting infantry follows in coordinated rushes that threaten to outflank Murphy's remaining positions. The broken rifle, still visible among the stones, becomes a monument to battlefield improvisation that succeeded longer than reasonable tactical assessment suggested possible, buying time measured in minutes that may determine whether 3 companies of American soldiers escape encirclement. Murphy's radio crackles with updates from Lieutenant Morrison, the main force finally beginning their fighting withdrawal, but still requiring time to disengage from German positions without leaving wounded behind. "Bridge element, we're moving but taking casualties. Can you hold another 30 minutes? The question represents an impossible choice between abandoning the position and accepting losses that will haunt survivors for decades, between tactical common sense and the kind of moral decision that transforms ordinary soldiers into legends they never wanted to become. The response comes not from calculation, but from someplace deeper than tactical training or survival instinct. "We'll hold," Murphy keys back, knowing the promise commits his men to a defensive action that exceeds reasonable expectations of what infantry can accomplish without support. His broken weapon, abandoned among the stones, represents the moment when equipment becomes less important than decisions that separate those who return home from those who remain forever in Italian soil beside ancient bridges. What happens next occurs in slow motion and lightning speed simultaneously, Murphy's perception distorted by adrenaline and the crystal clarity that sometimes accompanies moments when survival depends on actions that contradict every instinct for self-preservation. The German assault reaches the bridge itself, enemy infantry advancing through the stone arches while their supporting tank provides covering fire that systematically destroys American defensive positions. Murphy moves between his men's positions, coordinating their fire while enemy bullets snap through the air around him with the sound of angry hornets. His absence of personal weapon becomes tactical advantage, allowing mobility that rifle-armed soldiers cannot match, while maintaining defensive coordination that keeps German infantry cautious despite their overwhelming numerical superiority. The broken M1 lies forgotten among the stones, its symbolic value replaced by Murphy's physical presence at the point where American determination meets German professional competence in a contest that will be remembered differently by those who survive it. The secret remains what it felt like from inside. Not heroic legend, but desperate improvisation by soldiers too young to understand the historical significance of their refusal to break contact when tactical doctrine demanded withdrawal. The sound of American artillery finally echoes from the hills behind them, 104 shells impacting among German positions as the main force coordinates their withdrawal with supporting fires that signal relief approaching after 2 hours that stretched like days. Murphy's radio crackles with Lieutenant Morrison's voice, steady now with the confidence of tactical support. Bridge element, friendly armor moving to your position. Hold for 10 more minutes. The promise of relief arrives simultaneously with recognition that Murphy's squad has accomplished something that will require official explanation in after-action reports that transform chaos into clean narrative. The German attack falters as enemy commanders realize they face not just a handful of desperate defenders on an Italian bridge, but an entire American force reorganizing for coordinated counterattack. The Panzer IV withdraws first, its commander unwilling to expose his tank to American armor advancing through the hills beyond the bridge, followed by supporting infantry who leave behind scattered equipment and the bitter knowledge that 8 riflemen held them off longer than tactical doctrine suggested possible. Murphy sits among the stones, where his broken M1 still lies, twisted and useless, its metal warmed by morning sun, while he struggles to explain to arriving officers how his squad maintained defensive positions against overwhelming odds using nothing more than standard infantry weapons and an improvised deception that should never have worked for 2 hours. His hands shake from exhaustion and adrenaline, the physical aftermath of decisions that seemed clear under fire but defy rational explanation in the growing calm of tactical success. Captain Harrison arrives with the relief force, his expression mixing professional assessment with personal wonder as he surveys the bridge, approaches littered with evidence of sustained combat. "Murphy, battalion wants a full report on how 8 men held this position." The German unit commander estimates he faced at least a reinforced platoon with anti-tank support. The request for official explanation represents the beginning of transformation from lived experience to military legend, lived chaos becoming neat sentences that will appear in unit histories and citation recommendations. Jenkins receives medical attention for his shrapnel wounds, the bar gunners' steady fire having created the backbone of their defensive capability, while Murphy coordinated positions and maintained the tactical deception. "Tell them we had help," Jenkins says to Murphy while medics work on his legs, gesturing toward the broken rifle still lashed to the bridge masonry. "Tell them about your secret weapon." The comment carries the mixture of exhaustion and dark humor that binds men who have shared experiences beyond normal military service. The after-action report will mention tactical innovation and exemplary leadership under fire, Murphy's improvised use of disabled equipment to create enemy uncertainty, receiving official recognition in language that captures results without conveying the terror and uncertainty that accompanied each decision. The broken M1 becomes Exhibit A in a story of battlefield adaptation that will be retold in infantry schools and training manuals. Its twisted metal representing American determination in the face of overwhelming odds. Years later, Murphy will wake from dreams where he smells cordite and hears German voices calling coordinates across an Italian bridge, his hands reaching automatically for weapons that exist only in memory, while the sound of artillery echoes through Texas nights far from the Volturno River. The broken rifle appears in these dreams, still lashed to ancient stonework, its metal twisted into shapes that catch morning light, filtering through olive groves where shadows move with the persistence of memory. The official citation arrives months later, formal language describing Murphy's actions on a January morning when 8 soldiers held a bridge through tactical innovation and exemplary leadership. The words capture what happened without conveying what it felt like. The difference between historical record and personal experience remaining as wide as the gap between legend and the weight of carrying such memories for decades afterward. If this story reminded you that behind every medal there's a human being carrying memories we'll never fully see, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to revisit history with us in the next story.